Hey, what's going on, guys? Brian Kelly from Zombie Guitar here. Today's lesson is going to be about songwriting. So we're going to be looking at how the pulse can significantly affect the vibe of the music. So when I say pulse, at least for the purposes of this lesson, we're going to be looking at snare drum placement. So I'm going to play a chord progression, and then I'm going to put a rhythm section to it that has drums and bass behind it. And depending on where the snare drum is placed is going to significantly change the vibe of the music. So if you don't happen to have a drummer on hand, or if you don't want to, write a drum beat on your computer or something like that, you can still imply where the snare drum is just by the way you strum. So depending on which strums are accented versus which strums are not accented, that can imply where the snare drum is, ultimately affecting the vibe of the music. All right, so let's start off by looking at the chord progression. So this song is going to be in the key signature of E major. E major and C sharp minor are a relative major-minor pair. So this song has kind of like a darker vibe to it. So I'm just going to say that this is C sharp minor. But just keep in mind that E major and C sharp minor are a relative major-minor pair. They are the same key signature. So let me just play the chord progression for you real quick, and then we'll get into all the details. Alright, so that's the chord progression right there, and all the chords are part of this key signature except for one. So this chord right here, this G sharp major chord, that's the one out of key chord that was used. Diatonic to this key signature, you would have a G sharp minor. It's a G sharp major that was used right there. I actually made a lesson about that chord. That's the chord that is on the within the grouping of 6 on the circle of fifths, the inner circle counterclockwise position. That chord being made into a major chord, which is what we're doing right here. That's my favorite chord. I made a video, it's called My Favorite Chord. I'll post a link to that below if you want to learn more about that chord. But aside from that one chord, everything else is 100% in the key of E major / C sharp minor. So let's now take a look at how we can go about changing the vibe of this music by adding some drums to it, or changing the pulse of the music. So this first example here is where the snare is going to land on the 2 and the 4. So if this is in 4/4 timing, so you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're bobbing your head along with the song, and 1, 2, 3, 4 seems to fit. The snare is going to be on the 2 and the 4. So kick is going to be on the 1 and the 3. Snare is going to be on the 2 and the 4. So kick, snare, 1, snare, 3, snare, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be the vibe. Alright, so there's the first example. So that was with snare on the 2 and the 4. So I also kind of changed up the way I was playing the chords. Rather than just strumming the chords, I was doing a little pattern like this. So just kind of add some rhythmic effect. So that rhythmic effect that I did with the guitar is going to remain constant. I'm just going to simply change where the location of the snare is for example number 2. So guitar constant, snare drum changing, ultimately changing the vibe. Let's take a look at example 2. So for this final example, we're going to be changing the time signature. So by doing this, we can access a new vibe that otherwise wouldn't be possible by strictly sticking with 4/4. So the audience, unless they're a musician, they're not really going to be able to tell that it's not in 4/4 timing. The song still kind of flows. It's just the vibe is changed. It's not in 4/4 with the snare landing on the 2 and the 4. It's not in 4/4 with the snare landing on the 3. It's now going to be in 5/4. And the snare is going to land on the 3 and the 5. So before you run away, before you get intimidated by this whole time signature thing, let me just give you a very, very quick explanation. So when you look at a time signature, you have a top number and you have a bottom number. The top number means how many, the bottom number means of what. So most songs that you hear on the radio, especially, today's music, modern music, most songs are going to be in 4/4. That means 4 quarter notes per measure. So when you're bobbing your head along to a song and you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, you're just counting 4 quarter notes per measure. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. So how many of what? So when we change the time signature to 5/4, there's just going to be 5 quarter notes per measure. So 5 quarter notes. How many of what? So now the measures are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's going to be 5 quarter notes per measure. It's going to change the vibe of the music. We're going to be putting the snare drum on the 3 and the 5. The typical listener isn't really going to know that it's odd. They're just going to hear a vibe and they're just going to say, oh, okay, the song has a vibe to it, but they're not really going to know that it's in 5/4 unless they're a musician. So point being is you can write music in odd time signatures and it's not really going to sound off to the listener. It's just going to have a vibe that's otherwise not accessible in 4/4 timing. All right, so with that said, I'm now going to put on my original song for you, Odd Times. There's a couple interesting theory concepts that are going on in this song. The verses are in 5/4, the chorus is in 3/4, or you could say 6/8, depending on what your perspective is. And then the bridge section has a key change in it, and then the outro of the song switches back to the original key. So a couple interesting theory things going on in this video. If you want to check out the whole thing, I really, really appreciate you listening to my song. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.